earth is my home. I promise to keep it healthy and beautiful. I will love the land, the air, the water, and all living creatures. I will be a defender of my planet, united with friends. I will save the earth.
My name is Commissioner Frank Avila. I'm a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And the name of our show today is Get the Dirt on Composting. And as my guest, I have Jennifer Jarland. She's a founding member and current chairman of the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition, a non-for-profit organization that works to foster food scraps recycling in Illinois. She is also the recycling program coordinator for Kane County, and she is responsible for the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition building a robust food scrap recycling industry in our state. Thanks for being on the show, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I have to say, I am not responsible for that. There's a whole giant group of people working on this issue, and many groups working on this.
Yes. And it's a big job.
It is.
Compost recycling there.
Definitely.
And so now, people don't even know what is the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition. What is it?
Sure. Well, the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition formed, well, formally in 2016, but much earlier than that, really. We started having the conversation in about 2012. A group of county program coordinators like myself who work on recycling. We started talking about the next big piece of the garbage pie. What's going in the landfill that we should be recovering instead that might have a better use. And of course, food is at the top of that list. With as much food as we do put in the landfill in Illinois, it's about 13% of the total of what's going to the landfill is food.
13%?
Food scraps, 13.
Oh.
Yeah, out of I think 21% is organic material. So we started looking at how can we recover this from the landfill and put it to better use. And so we started looking at doing a forum, which we did in Highland Park in 2012. And then from there, we started gathering more interested members and working on how we could start residential programs, how we could start commercial programs, how do we get the restaurants composting. Let's see a little bit of the overview of what the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition does. Currently, we are working to help build the infrastructure, so we're connecting all the stakeholders who are working on collecting and processing the food scraps that are being produced, and then of course the end markets for that finished compost as well. We work a lot in advocacy and policy, supporting different policies that will advance this work. Programs that will advance this work, so implementing programs. We do a lot of market and business development work, and also, of course, a lot of education and outreach, because that is key. Getting the word out there, helping people understand this is something they should be thinking about, and how to do it as well.
I think that's key. You're right. Education. It starts from education.
Yes, it's a big part of what we do. And how does a small group do a not-for-profit organization wherein the members and the board members are volunteers doing this work? Well, we have a lot of very active committees that are doing this work.
Interesting.
On all of those points that I just mentioned. And they meet monthly or so, and as a group work to advance whatever element that they're working on. Particularly market development is very important, as well as as I said, the policy and the programs.
No, we're talking about compost. Could you explain to the audience, what is compost?
Sure.
What is compost?
So compost can be a verb or a noun. Composting food scraps and or landscape waste means to take something that is organic, something that was once alive and growing and is at the end of its use, put it back into the earth. So what composting does is it takes those materials and blends them together, the wet materials and the dry materials, or the green and the brown. All the microorganisms come up into that and eat through it, and process it and turn it into a very, very high nutrient content soil amendment.
Soil amendment.
So it looks like dirt, but
Yeah.
you mix it in with topsoils and other soils as well to make the soil more fertile.
Yes.
So composting is really important for a couple of reasons. That's one of them. We want to return those nutrients that were in the food scraps back to the soil to grow more food out of, because our soils are largely depleted.
Of nutrients.
So as you well know, so and so returning the nutrients to the soil is a big reason why composting is important, but also because food scraps and other organic materials in landfills, as they rot, they create a gas called methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas contributing to climate change.
Yes, contributing to climate change. And that is compost. That's compost there. Now, and you also mentioned why compost is important, because it enriches the soil. And when you start seeing worms in the soil, you know that's a healthy soil.
Right.
See, is it dirt or soil?
It's well, that's semantics. But yes.
Yes.
So compost is a soil amendment, and also it's good to differentiate between compost and mulch, because I think a lot of people get confused about that compost is something that you do blend with the soils that you plant into, and the nutrients then come up into the plants. Mulch is a top dressing.
Yes.
That's a heavier, woodier substance that then holds the moisture in. But compost itself, when mixed in the soil, has other benefits besides returning the nutrients. It also helps it retain water because it's more sponge-like. So it holds the water in the soil rather than letting it drain through, which is, as far as water management goes, a very big thing, especially in this time when we're all flooding around here. More compost in the soil would help the soil retain it rather than letting it all sit on top or run through.
Sure. And also, I find that the farmers like it also, because it saturates that soil more.
Right.
It holds it in there. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned about you go and you're involved in local and state policy and legislation. Can you tell me about laws you have supported? And because you said you started in 2012.
Right.
2012.
Yeah, so people were having this conversation, obviously, across the United States as well as locally, before that even.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the first pieces of legislation that happened in Illinois in recent history regarding composting was in 2009. A law was passed that allowed for landscape waste, organics, composting facilities to accept food scrap in with that material for composting without having to go through the really rigorous permitting process that they had to before. So it made it easier for them to accept food scrap. And to date, I believe 10 of the 45 or so processing facilities do now have a permit to accept food scrap. There is a whole list, though, of legislation that is on our website. Okay. It's about this long, and that's from 2009, as I said, all the way up till present. And some of the other laws that we have been advocates of and helping to connect the stakeholders. Whoops, we lost our bag of compost there.
Compost, yeah.
So some of the other laws that have been key in helping to foster composting industry in the state. One of the things is one of the laws allowed for urban farms and community gardens to receive food scraps onto their property if they were going to process it there and use it on site. So that was a new one. And then 2 landscape waste transfer stations, meaning the place where once they pick it up on the curbside in the little trucks, they take it there and they bulk it and then put it into larger trucks to go off to the processing facilities where they're going to turn it into compost. Those transfer stations are also now allowed, 2 of them in the state as pilots, are allowed to receive food scraps blended in with their landscape waste as well. And that is a great opportunity for them to look at best practices and how this can work without creating what everyone's afraid of is the stink, you know, what about bringing these food scraps in here? How is that going to work? So they are able to blend that with the landscape waste and keep it all, you know, clean and non-problematic. So that's another big law. And there's one that allows for creating drop-off locations, either permanent drop-off locations or temporary drop-off locations, like we do each fall at the end of October to collect all the pumpkins that people have,
Sure, yes.
so that those are being composted instead of landfilled. So those were also difficult to do before because you needed to be permitted as a waste facility to receive this waste, and that was just a huge lengthy process. So this law changed that so that you can, with minimal trouble, just a form and the approval of your local recycling coordinator, have a one-day drop-off event for things like pumpkins. Or also in Lake County, they have a location where they are accepting food scraps from residents full-time at a drop-off location. You can just bring them and drop them in their bins there, and those are serviced regularly. So that's key as well. I hope to see more of those. Along with the residential.
Now,
and
in
commercial
Cook County, how many drop-offs do we have here in Cook County?
Public drop-offs for food scraps?
Like you mentioned, pumpkin. They could drop off the pumpkins.
So those one-day events.
Are they normally set up with the villages?
Right, the villages are often the coordinators
Yes.
or the counties,
Yes.
or different entities like Scarce, which is an organization in DuPage County.
Yeah.
Working on this, and they were actually the originator of the pumpkin recycling program.
And as you mentioned,
And I think
permitting
it's-
is difficult sometimes if you have to go get a permit.
Right.
Yeah, and so you overcome that
Through
one step.
legislation,
Yes,
that it is
legislation.
now allowed that you can do a one-day event without having to go through that permitting process. Right. To answer your question, I think that Scarce is tracking the number of pumpkin events. It's got to be around 50 now that happen each year, maybe more than that.
Interesting, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to educate the public. I mean, educate everyone
Right.
there. And
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that pumpkin recycling opportunity come end of October. It'll be out there. And again, it's Scarce is SCARCE. It's an acronym, but you can just Google that .org, and the pumpkin information will be on there.
now, do you know if on education, do they go into grammar schools yet? Have they gone into schools? And
Certainly, there's a lot of work being done, again, by many entities for school education on compost.
Yeah.
The Illinois Food Scrap Coalition, in partnership with the 7 Generations Ahead,
Okay.
which I sometimes call SGA, 7 Generations Ahead. They are a sustainability consulting company out of Oak Park. We work very closely with them. They are the group that gets the grants that fund a lot of the work that Illinois Food Scrap Coalition is doing. And they also work with Scarce, who does education, but they've created an education program for outreach into schools, and
Interesting,
not
yeah.
only just creating doing a waste audit to find out what they can divert, but
Yeah.
then creating that program, also working a lot with food reuse as
Food
well
reuse.
as food composting, so that food that is edible can be redistributed and eaten before it's discarded and composted.
And this probably involved into setting up businesses where people go out there and set their own business to do this type of composting. You know, probably because, you know, I'm reading that how can people's business and restaurants start composting, but does this create another business where a person could go into to help the restaurants to collect their waste, their food waste, and start their own composting facilities?
Right, so there are many players in this field.
Yes,
As
yeah.
I said, you have the food waste generators, are the restaurants and businesses
Okay.
creating, and residents creating the food scrap. Then you need someone who's going to pick it up.
Yeah.
We call those in the industry the haulers,
Now,
the waste haulers.
those restaurants that have their own bin now, right? Their own, where they put the food in, where the haulers could come in and pick them up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's some infrastructure that has to be in place
Yeah.
for this all to happen,
Yeah.
for sure. But so there's the generators, the haulers, then they take it somewhere to get it processed, and then there's the end market. All of those players in there. But there was a couple of questions in there.
Yeah.
But definitely there's opportunity in this field, and that is something that the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition does hope to foster is an increase in the infrastructure and the players in the field. So the more people interested in hauling or processing the compost, the better. And also the end use is very important. So that's a big part of our message, is we want to try to reach people who are looking for finished compost as a soil amendment to use on either their, their parks or golf courses, or agriculturally, on highway projects, things like that. So we need to close the loop with the whole thing.
Yes. Now, you mentioned, we mentioned people, business, and restaurants. How many restaurants are there here in Cook County? What's the percentage of restaurants doing this now? Do you know?
That's a great question. I don't know the percentage. It is a growing number.
Yes, I must imagine, because if they want to protect the environment and everyone is environmental conscious.
That's right. And definitely it is a topic that all restaurants are looking at now, is how to reduce their food waste to start with by ordering their supplies better.
Yes.
How to feed the food to people first, and then to compost it. So it is a topic that they're all looking at. So we have a program through the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition called We Compost.
We Compost, okay.
And it's a voluntary recognition program for restaurants who do compost their food scraps. And there are a couple of levels there. There's ones for restaurants who compost in a bin out the back, like there on site, backyard composting style. Then there's the, that's green level. Silver level are restaurants or businesses or schools or institutions or hospitals. They're all eligible to be in the We Compost program, that are recycling or having composted their food scraps from the kitchen. So the pre-consumer food scraps, all the scraps that they cut off and don't use. And then gold level membership in We Compost is the kitchen scraps as well as the plate scraps that come off from out in the front of house. And so there's over 100, but I'm not positive.
And it's growing and growing.
Number. It's growing all the time.
It's growing, yeah. This is and this is good for the environment. As you mentioned, if it goes into a landfill, it creates a methane gas.
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to add one thing. So when I said there's 100 of the We Compost members, that is probably a small fraction of the restaurants that are composting, because maybe there are restaurants out there composting, and again, restaurants, businesses, institutions, et cetera, who are composting that don't know about the We Compost program and aren't members, but they are participating in that. So we, again, would love to connect those dots and get everyone on board.
Yeah, and I'm glad I met your one of your people. I was at one of the Earth Day sites, and one of your persons was out there. It was at the Veterans Hospital on Damon Street.
Oh, yes.
Damon, and she was out there explaining to the public, and that's how I happened to come across your organization.
Wonderful.
And I said, we have to inform the public on what you're doing as relates to composting.
Well, thank you for your help.
Well, it's so important.
That's great.
Because compost will make, as I mentioned, the dirt soil, putting the nutrients back into that soil there. Now, please share some of the coalition's accomplishments over the last 7 years. And it's amazing that Illinois started in 2012, where maybe other states were doing it already. Correct? I mean, it must have been, we're 50 states, and maybe California was ahead of us, maybe.
That's right. And I previously lived in Colorado, and there's a lot of composting programs happening there as well. Actually, before I answer that question, can I jump back just a little bit? I wanted to talk about the different kinds of composting as well, just for the audience who may not be as familiar with the different methods. Basically, there are three. There's the backyard composting, where you're putting your food scraps in with your leaves and whatnot in your backyard and just processing it there and then applying it to your garden. That's great, because you don't have to have the transportation, no emissions from it. You're just composting all your food scraps, keeping them out of the landfill, and utilizing the nutrients in your garden. Some people don't have gardens. Some people don't have the passion to do something like this. So there are residential programs that are springing up now across the nation and locally, and especially in the Chicago, greater Chicago area, that can be a couple of different types of programs. The curbside collection is usually a ride-along program, because here in Illinois, all the landscape waste is already banned from the landfill and is being collected at the curb already. There's already a truck on the road collecting this material. Ride-along programs mean you can add your food scraps to that landscape waste, and it goes off to one of the permitted transfer facilities and then to one of the processing facilities. So that's residential programs. There's also bucket programs now. There's a lot of little companies and entrepreneurs, as you mentioned before, starting these companies where they'll deliver you a clean bucket at the beginning of the week. You fill it up in your kitchen with all your food scraps and set it out for a swap once a week, and they bring you a clean new bucket. And that's great. I do that through the winter in the city because my compost freezes in the backyard, and then I go back to backyard composting
Now,
in the
person
spring.
watching this TV show, how can they find out where to to contact these people that does this?
Right, so information about backyard composting and the different service providers for collection can be found on the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition website, which is just Illinois Composts with an S.org. IllinoisComposts.org. And under resources, we have the list of the haulers and the different
Interesting. That's
service providers.
So that's one thing you're doing with the residential.
Right, and then there's commercial, which is the third kind. So backyard, residential, and commercial. Commercial is all of the businesses that I talked about before who have larger scale dumpsters out the back. They're the largest generator of food scraps, and then they are being hauled by any number of the local waste and recycling haulers who have now adopted also compost programs, and they're hauling those off to processing facilities.
That's very interesting, and I'm glad I came across your booth that day.
Me too. I'm glad Liz was out there. That's our administrative coordinator.
Yeah,
Liz,
because when I saw composting, and you said there's many ways of composting, and I love composting because we do composting at the district there, at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. We except it's not food waste. It's we use wood chips and the human waste. You know, we take care of the two peas in the pot. We treat poop and pee. So on the solid side, the poop, it's a combination of 2/3 chip and 1/3 poop. This is our composting, organic waste there.
Yeah.
Thing. And then
biosolids.
Biosolids. Well, it's biosolids and composting.
Right.
And we do have a lot of composting there. But I'm really glad that your organization has these different businesses belonging to your group to do a composting organization as it relates to legislation, because that's the key.
Right.
That's very important, because like you said, if they had to permit everything, it'd be slowed up, and maybe no one would even do it because of permits there.
That's right, and that's something that our policy committee is always looking at. How do we make it easier for this industry to grow?
Yes.
In a healthy and sustainable direction.
Yes.
So policy is key for sure.
Now, now this is 2019, and you started this in 2012.
Right.
Okay. So what do you want to do in 2019? What is your goal? We have a new governor now. He's setting out goals, see how he could help Illinois. So what is your group in Illinois doing now for 2019? Right.
So each year since we incorporated as a not-for-profit organization, which was in 2016, each year since we have created a strategic plan.
Okay.
The board that was formed in 2016.
And first of all, who sits on your board?
Oh my goodness.
I mean,
we
different
have
groups.
16 people.
16 people
currently on the board, and they represent the stakeholders. So we have haulers, we have processors, we have business owners, we have sustainability specialists, we have, also there's anaerobic and aerobic digestion. So we have that represented. We have program coordinators like myself from local governments. I feel like I'm forgetting someone. Definitely there's educators on there. And so we have a board, again, of volunteers. And then we do have one paid employee. That's Liz Bosarge, who you met, who is our administrative coordinator. And our membership fees go towards supporting the work that she does, which is the basic running of our business.
So we got 2019 now.
Yes,
right?
so I was just going to point out the strategic plan.
Now, do you plan for a year at a time or 2 years at a time, or how far out do you go?
Well, we definitely have a wider view happening than just 1 year, but our strategic plan focuses on the year that we're in. So we have a really clear guide of what we want to accomplish in the immediate future. Of course, when we have these conversations, we're looking at a broader picture. When we did our first strategic plan, it had 3 years in it. But we found that because there's so much to do and because we're all so busy, we really just need to focus on the year that we're in. So that's what we did. We've changed the structure of it as well, but now it's just a simple 4-page document, again, that can be found on the website with 4 main sections in it, which go along the lines of our mission statement, which again are advocacy, program implementation, market and business development, and then policy and outreach.
Yes.
Again, education and outreach. So those are the main areas that we have. And a lot of it is looking at how to create a fundraising plan, looking at, again, working with the new governor, working with the state of Illinois to inform them about the importance of composting and hopefully garner some funds there associated with the solid waste fund. We're working on again, looking at policy and what the best policies are that we could be focusing on to help open things up and foster growth in the industry.
And basically what you're working on is a nonpartisan type of policy because everyone will benefit for what you're doing. It doesn't matter what party it belongs to because what you're working on is bipartisan for both parties to work together on what you want to accomplish.
That is certainly the goal.
Yes.
Easier said than done, but that is the goal. Yes, and then programs, again, working to grow the We Compost program. We're always looking at that, and again, it's trying to reach out to restaurants that might be composting that don't know about our program and get them wrapped into the program because part of the benefits of that is you get a decal for your window to say, hey, we're green, we compost here. Also, we've created maps that are on our website, Google Maps, where we try to promote these restaurants. So please, everybody go frequent these restaurants who are doing the right thing. They're composting their food scraps, and so we're promoting those businesses as well. Again, education through schools and K through 12 and universities, colleges, to incorporate organics diversion into their waste system as well as into their educational curriculum, so that they're teaching about this as well.
That's good for the K through 12 because if you educate the kindergartens, the first graders will go home and tell their parents. Starting from the start.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah, very important on education.
Indeed. Is that the end?
To keep it healthy and beautiful.